Hello, everybody. Welcome to VGWAworld. I'm Cobrettie.
And I'm Walley.
And come join us today, along with a few special guests, as we look at the most memorable matches of the 1980s. We're not saying that these are the best matches of the 1980s, but the ones that you remember the most.
And we will be handing out the most prestigious award within all of wrestling, ... video games, the Walleys.
So let's kick off these most memorable matches, and I'm going to start with my personal pick. This match took place in 1983, happening at the inaugural Starrcade. A vulgar display of brutality by Roddy Piper and Greg Valentine in the dog collar match. I didn't watch this match whenever it initially aired. And for anybody who wants a good laugh, I'm going to tell you about how old I am with this story. I found out about this match picking it up in the Lords of the Ring Pro Wrestling Illustrated VHS tape that I picked up from Suncoast Video in the mall.
What's VHS?
I picked this match as my most memorable match from the 1980s because it had a degree of violence that I had not seen in wrestling before. I was fully into wrestling at the tail end of the Rockin' Wrestling Connection, and the homogenized version of wrestling that WWF presented had already started to bleed into WCW. The violence in this match was something that I was totally not used to. And I knew that wrestlers were working together, but in my mind, I couldn't comprehend how these two could go at it and not cause major injury to each other. A match that is often overlooked. You should check it out, as it is a great example of how a brawl can also have in-ring psychology.
You know, that's a great match, Cobrettie. One thing, though, their ring gear looks exactly alike. Speaking of looking exactly alike, our first award is the Randy Hogan Best Knockoff Wrestler.
Our nominees are Insane Warrior, Matt Mania, Matterhorn Decker, Champion Wrestler, Fighter Hayabusa, Pro Wrestling, and the multiple appearances of Krillin.
And the winner is Matterhorn Decker from Champion Wrestler.
The large, highly detailed sprite for Matterhorn Decker helped ensure the win for the highly prestigious Best Knockoff Wrestler Award.
If you check out our translation of the manual, you'll kind of notice a similarity to another giant 80s wrestler, Andre the Giant. Not only are they similar in stature, they're also similar in their alcohol intake. Hulk Hogan wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the next pick of the 80s wrestling matches by a good show friend, Ryan Sanderson. Check out his YouTube channel, as he's an aspiring musician who mixes folk, country, and classic rock in all of his songs, which is kind of like what this match is, a classic.
Thanks for including me, guys. I want to say that the match that was most memorable to me was the December 26, 1983 match between the Iron Sheik and Bob Buckland. The Iron Sheik put Bob in a camel clutch, forcing his corner to throw in the towel, and it was the arrival of my favorite 80s WWF villain. While everyone wanted the Hulk Hogan stretch wrestler, I was proud to be the only kid on the block with the Iron Sheik. And ever since, I seem to have always sided with the villains.
You know, I like villains too, which brings us to our next Walley, the Meng Toughest Game Award. Our nominees are The New Type, Famicom, Matt Mania, PS4, Switch, Pro Wrestling on the Master System, Fire Pro Wrestling, PC Engine. And the winner is, or you're the loser, The New Type, Famicom. Because if you actually beat this game, you cheated the entire time.
Ryan, if you ever wanted to hunt down that Iron Sheik figure again, you should join the Wrestling Toys Gaming United Facebook group, led by the person who is giving us our next 80s memorable match pick, Steve McMahon.
Really? McMahon, you got no chance.
Steve, thank you for joining us today.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on.
And for those of you who don't know, he's across the pond, so how was Wembley?
Wembley was absolutely awesome. Probably not as good as Money in the Bank earlier on in the year out of the two shows I've attended this year, mainly because of the open air stadium at Wembley, so that sort of you couldn't hold in the noise as much, whereas Money in the Bank you could feel the energy in the crowd a lot more. But an epic show. It was great to see probably CM Punk's final match live in person, Saraya win the world title in her home country, and then MJF and Adam Cole stealing the show at the very end. So yeah, a very special event. Great to be there. So moving on to my match that I've been nominated for from the 80s, it's Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at Wrestlemania 3 in the Silverdome, brother, with 93,000 screaming Hulkamaniacs. Yeah, this match, I'd say, propelled Hulk Hogan's career higher than it already was. Obviously, he beat Andre the Giant, which is something no one had ever done, with the slam at the end, then finally delivering the leg drop and getting that 1, 2, 3. I think everything about this match was just special. The way they come out with the ring carts, to the way you get the epic quote from Gorilla Monsoon with, "It's the irresistible force versus the immovable object." I just think, yeah, it was a great moment. You look back and it's some monumental WrestleMania main events, and this is up there with the top 5 just for sheer star power and just a big moment in WWF history then. So yeah, an absolutely amazing match. The way that they worked on Hogan's back all the way through, and he kept trying to power slam Andre, but he couldn't. And then at the end, he managed to finally get him up, slamming him down. Yeah, just a brilliant match, and one that will be remembered forever. It's still on the quote's still on the front of the WWE intro now. So yeah, just a great match. So I just want to say, yeah, thank you for having me on. If you're not following us on Facebook, the group is called Wrestling Toys Gaming United. We are from the UK, but worldwide followers are welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Hope everyone's having a great day.
This was a memorable match to me, because Andre the Giant, at the time, seemed like a legitimate person who could actually defeat Hulk Hogan. And it was Andre who managed to take the title off of Hogan, and none of this would be possible without the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. And so, our next Walley to hand out is the $1 Million Man most expensive game that someone would actually want to purchase.
And the nominees are Kinnikuman Gold Cart, Apu Arcade by Sega, Sergeant Slaughter Mat Wars, and Television Body Slam. And the winner is Sergeant Slaughter's Mat Wars!
It was one of the 2 games that were actually in our price range. But you just wait. One day, move over, Logan Paul. I don't want a gold chain with a Pokemon card around my neck. I want a gold chain with a golden Kinnikuman cart. Word life.
And as far as Intellivision's Body Slam, this game looks like title match wrestling, which we gambled on, but we snake-eyed out.
But that would be no problem for our next special guest. And I mean this in the best way possible. The most successful loser I know, with the 2nd largest scratch-off channel in the world, featuring daily uploads of him playing scratch-offs. It is ARPLATINUM. And whenever he's not playing the Texas Lotto, you might catch him in the destination of his match pick, Atlantic City, home of WrestleMania 5. And the match pick, the Mega Powers explode. Hulk Hogan versus the Macho Man, Randy Savage.
The Mega Powers, with the most intense handshake I've ever seen. I have a more memorable follow-up match. Hogan versus Zeus. SummerSlam no holds barred. I don't care what people say. I like the movie. With Hogan having multiple appearances on this list, that leads us up to our next Walley. Red hat, green shirt guy most appearances in a game. And the nominees are
Tiger Mask, Antonio Inoki, The Road Warriors, and Hulk Hogan. And the winner is Hulk Hogan! Dun 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 dun. And since we're on the topic of multiple appearances, our next match pick is a match from what is considered the best trilogy of matches ever. This pick comes from PatmanQC, a gaming historian who covers arcades and video games in depth, and lucky for us, an avid wrestling fan. He even did in-depth coverage of our favorite guilty pleasure, WWF in Your House.
personally signed copy to his pal.
And recently, also covered the history of Tecmo Wrestling for the NES. And his pick is the Chi-Town Rumble, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Ric Flair. A memorable bout for most of us, for the masterclass that was put on of wrestling skill. But a bout that was way more memorable for PatmanQC, being able to see it live with his father. And in addition to that, unknowingly, sitting next to Wrestling Observer's own Dave Meltzer. Sometimes, when you really need a nature boy Ric Flair, you can't afford it. And you settle for Nature Boy Buddy Landell. So our next Walley is the Nature Boy Buddy Landell Best Budget Game Award. And the nominees are Matmania for the PS4 and Switch, Superstar Pro Wrestling for the Nintendo Famicom, Champion Wrestler for the Switch, and UWC for the NES. And the winner is UWC for the NES, because it's hard to beat the price of free.
Our next match comes from someone who has been crazy enough to follow us from the very beginning. When the chips are down, we feel like Billy Gunn. We want to hang up our boots. Thanks to WarlockX4 for keeping us motivated and for giving us our next match of the 80s. WarlockX4's selection, Savage vs. Steamboat. An iconic match of the ages that has lived for decades upon decades. With Steamboat overcoming Randy Savage's brutal attacks and almost being hit by the bell, but being saved by George the Animal Steel, Steamboat wins the match with a small package.
If George the Animal Steel did not push the Macho Man Randy Savage off the top rope, he would have been able to take to the skies and hit his flying elbow drop. And so, for our next Walley, we are honoring the Macho Man with the Macho Man Best Hang Time Award. The nominees are Ramen Man for his killer karate kicks, and Kenny Kuman for the Famicom. Strong Machine for his drop kick, and Tag Team Wrestling for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Victory Musashi for his plancha and Fire Pro Wrestling Combination Tag for the PC Engine. And the multiple Chojin Warriors for their vertical leaps, and Kenny Kuman for the Famicom Disk System. And the winner is, what an upset, Strong Machine for his dropkick and tag team wrestling. Not only did Strong Machine have impressive hang time, he also learned how to levitate and performed the original Coast to Coast. Take that, Shane McMahon. Our next 1980s memorable match comes from H. Cole's One Gaming. He is our brand of crazy, covering a variety of topics, from his favorite manga, such as Sergeant Frog, to his favorite villains, such as Megavolt from Darkwing Duck. You'll never know what will be coming from H. Cole's One Gaming next.
And watch his Dot Hack series on TikTok.
For his pick, he picked the Bushwhackers versus the fabulous Rougeau brothers from Wrestlemania 5.
Who could forget the antics of Butch and Luke? These two started the comedy act of the WWF in the early 80s, which have grown and lived on throughout all the eras.
A match that is memorable because it features two tag teams of clashing styles. And this match also features H. Cole's One Gaming's favorite 1990s mid-card wrestler, Jacques Rougeau, who would eventually become the Mountie.
I'm the Mountie. Since this is our first mention of tag team, this leads us to our next award, the Road Warrior Award for the best two-player game. You're welcome, Cobrettie. And the nominees are Champion Wrestler for the Switch, Fire Pro Wrestling, PC Engine, Pro Wrestling on the NES, and Tag Team Wrestling on the NES. And the winner is, you can't believe it, it's Fire Pro Wrestling on the PC Engine. Congratulations to Fire Pro Wrestling.
It was a close competition between Fire Pro Wrestling and Champion Wrestler, but ultimately, Fire Pro Wrestling Combination Tag ended up the winner due to the ability to perform double team maneuvers.
You know, Cobrettie, I'm starting to feel left out in this whole 1980s wrestling match thing. You haven't even said, hey, Walley, what is your favorite match?
Hey, Wally, what is your favorite match?
Well, thanks for asking. Mine is a classic. Mine is a brutal match between two 1980s icon. One was a G.I. Joe, the other was on the other side of evil. Who am I talking about? Sergeant Slaughter versus the Iron Sheik, where if he didn't make the Iron Sheik bleed, he wasn't going to wrestle in Washington, D.C. ever again.
You see, Wally, this is why I can't let you pick matches. Because you just pick them all wrong. We can both agree that Piper versus Valentine was the better bloody brawl.
All I do know is Sergeant Slaughter and Iron Sheik match had the 4 moves of death and a bunch of boots.
Sergeant Slaughter had loaded steel-toe boots. The Iron Sheik had his loaded boot. In a boot camp match where anything goes. This brings us to our next Walley Award, the Abdullah the Butcher Golden Fork Award for Best Weapon. The nominees are the Chair from Pro Wrestling on the Master System, the Bell from Tag Team Wrestling on the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Wrench from Superstar Pro Wrestling on the Famicom, and Nunchucks from Gokuaku Dump Masamoto on the Sega Mark III. And the winner is Nunchucks from Gokuaku Dump Masamoto.
You know, it was a given once you said nunchucks.
And for our last submission.
What do you mean last? I thought I was the last one. You always save the best for last. That had to have been me. Who could have been better?
Our next 80s memorable match pick comes from the statesman of Fire Pro Wrestling video games, Shadow Master. Shadow Master, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on your show. My pick would be the 1987 Sumo Hall Riot. Fun fact, Vader made his New Japan debut squashing Inoki in less than 5 minutes. The audience became so enraged that seats were lit on fire, and the venue was littered with garbage, resulting in New Japan being banned from the venue for 2 years. Now that's what you call making an impression.
Well, I quit.
Yeah, I feel very inadequate. I quit too.
I'm taking my toys and going home, man.
In addition to being a talented voice actor, Shadow Master is one of the most active members in the wrestling game community, submitting facts on how to play import wrestling games, scanning and archiving wrestling game materials to share with everybody, and providing character creations in the Steam Workshop for Fire Pro Wrestling World. Make sure to check out the various efforts for this wrestling video game Renaissance Man. Ah, crap. We can't quit. We still have one more award to give out.
Those Japanese matches are taken very seriously. You know who else takes wrestling seriously? Our last category, the David Schultz Wrestling is Not Fake Award. For the video game that accurately represents the action in the squared circle. And the nominees are Fire Pro Wrestling on the PC Engine, Pro Wrestling on the NES, Champion Wrestler on the Switch. UWC. And the winner is Fire Pro Wrestling on the PC Engine. This game has the most realistic action of all the wrestling games done in the 80s. And it has still maintained that same simulation and action throughout all the decades it has been around.
So thank you for joining us today, and make sure to check us next time as we continue Wrestle Rank. Entering in the 1990s, we will be reviewing and ranking Battle Royal for the TurboGrafx 16.